I know, it's a dramatic title, but I think that in many ways, Cobra Kai is no longer the show it used to be. That isn't to say it's a bad show, far from it, but I think that the later seasons failed in living up to the standard that Season 1 had set. And I have a problem. I've been arguing with all my friends about this, and now I don't have any friends. And I still can't stop thinking about this. So here is this video, so I can get this out of my mind. Cobra Kai's characters are not as good as they used to be. They fail to stay consistent, often acting out of character. Parts of their character remain unexplored or even forgotten, and I'm gonna go through each one. Let's start with Miguel. Miguel in Season 1 was easily my favorite of the teenagers, and his transformation from the sweet, kind boy to the aggressive and violent Cobra Kai student was the best part of Season 1. However, in Season 2, he is nothing like that. Firstly, let's establish what his character is, so that we can understand why he's been acting out of character. Miguel is someone who blindly believes in Johnny Lawrence and Cobra Kai, following their teachings to the letter, which leads him down the dark path. For most of the season, other than Coyote Creek, he doesn't really follow the strike first, strike hard, no mercy mindset of Cobra Kai. He doesn't really start any fights, he doesn't get angry at anyone, and he often acts out of character. For example, he calls Sam to apologize for the beach incident. The question is, why would he do that? In his mind, he was perfectly justified in striking first. You could say that he's grown since Johnny's talk with him at the beginning of the season, but that was about showing mercy, not striking first. Also, in Season 2 Episode 5, he stops trying to win back Sam and instead moves on to Tori, which really goes against him never accepting defeat like he was taught to do in Season 1. Despite being set up in Season 1, there is no tension between him and his family, or between him and Johnny. This, along with everything else I've said about Miguel, means that we don't get to explore his dark side after it being set up throughout the entirety of Season 1. He was supposed to be the new Johnny Lawrence, but he just ends up as this nice guy who's just there, and that just takes away from the impact of Cobra Kai and makes it a much less interesting show. Ironically, his redemption is through a speech by Johnny, the person he blindly looks up to, about not blindly following Cobra Kai. This, along with everything else I've said about Miguel, means that we don't get to explore his dark side after it being set up throughout the entirety of Season 1. Another thing this show doesn't explore is his rivalry with Robbie. And in the school fight, they're only fighting each other out of confusion. At the end of this fight, he shows mercy to Robbie, and he gets kicked off a balcony and almost dies for this. And when he wakes up from his coma in Season 3, he questions whether he made the right decision here. This seems like an interesting and logical direction to take with the character. However, after just one argument with Johnny, this question is dropped and never brought up again. And this isn't because he realizes that he made the right decision. This question is just dropped and moved on from. The rest of this season is just spent on him learning not to give up, which is something he learnt in Season 1 and also has nothing to do with the character. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any hope for his character moving forward, as the interesting parts of his character are gone through his botched redemption in Season 2. Let's now move on to Robbie. Robbie in Season 1 was a character who learnt to let go of the anger and bitterness stemming from his abandonment as a child, and took his life in a better direction. In the Season 1 finale, he finally lets go of the anger he holds towards Johnny and forgives him. However, in the first part of Season 2, some of this growth is undone, as he berates Johnny instead of letting go of his anger. And for the rest of Season 2, he has no character development and nothing really happens with him. The one exception to this is the school fight, where after being shown mercy, he still continues to attack Miguel out of anger and kicks him off the balcony. However, this doesn't make sense for the character. Since he's a miyagi-do student, he's learnt not to fight with anger, so him doing something so angry doesn't really make sense. If this had been built up to through exploring his rivalry with Miguel, then maybe it would make sense. However, this isn't done. While he is better in Season 3, with the story being about everyone leaving him and him joining Cobra Kai and Kreese, he still has problems with his character. While it initially makes sense for him to be angry at Daniel for getting him arrested, After he gets released, he's still angry and blames Daniel for him getting arrested. The problem with this is that it doesn't make sense. What did he expect? That he was going to live the rest of his life as a fugitive? The show could have given any other reason for this to make sense, like Daniel speaking out against Robbie's actions and disassociating with Robbie to save his business. But no, they gave this reason, and this reason is just nonsensical in the end. Now we're going to move on to Sam. Sam in season 1 was someone who was too afraid to speak her mind on things, and so just passively plays both sides in every conflict. But in season 2, there's just nothing to her. There's no interesting character development or change in her character from the beginning to the end, and she's just there for the sake of being there. And no, her relationship with Robbie and her rivalry with Tori don't count. They're just things that happen, they're not character development. And I really don't have anything else to say about her in season 2, because there's just nothing to say. Fortunately, in season 3, I have something to say. Unfortunately, it's still not that good. Straight from the get-go, despite being a miyagi-do, she becomes hyper-aggressive and consistently strikes first against Cobra Kai. She doesn't even question whether she should break the defense-only philosophy. This becomes even more absurd when you realize that this happened right after the school fight, and it makes you believe that she's learnt nothing from that. She claims she feels guilty for the school fight, yet she continually starts even more fights. The show's telling us one thing, yet showing another. At the same time, they give her PTSD, and her story is about getting over it. But my problem with that is that it gives no real depth to her character, and once it's over, what is her character? I'm not sure what they're gonna do with her in season 4, but I can only hope for it to be good. We'll now move on to Hawk. In season 1, Hawk was someone who was bullied mercilessly at school for his appearance, and therefore developed massive insecurities because of that. Through being taught by Johnny, he learns to change his entire persona and appearance so that people will like and respect him. However, he's still shown to have these insecurities, as in the season 1 finale, he kicks Robbie in the shoulder for insulting his hair. However, in seasons 2 and 3, the focus is more on his undying loyalty to Cobra Kai, rather than his insecurities as a person. While they do show some moments of insecurity with his character, it's not enough, and it ultimately doesn't result in any character growth. And no, I'm not saying that he doesn't grow at all. All I'm saying is that this growth is not because of his insecurities, which is strange because that's the main point of his character. His growth instead was from a character trait which didn't particularly exist within season 1, and is just added to season 2 without any explanation. However, I still think that in season 4, now that he's being trained by Daniel, his insecurities are going to be explored a lot more, and we're going to see some growth in that part of his character. I'm still disappointed that 2 seasons were spent not exploring this side of the character, especially since this is the main part of the character. Now let's move on to Dimitri. And the show makes it a point that this makes him really pathetic and weak. In season 1, Dimitri was a loser who had given up on himself and therefore doesn't try to change who he is. And in season 2, he learns to believe in himself and changes for the better. However, my issue with him is that he never really comes to terms with how pathetic he is. He just grows out of it, and it's never addressed again. Also, the transformation he goes through in season 2 is just so abrupt that it's hard to believe. And at the start of season 3, he just becomes really confident. At the end of season 2, he goes from being weak to being able to beat up Hawk out of nowhere. Also, in season 3, he doesn't grow or change, and he doesn't really have any flaws. However, now that he's being taught by Johnny, maybe he'll grow and change in season 4. Moving on to Kreese. While I like his character, I still think he has problems which hold him back. In season 3, the show tells the story of how Kreese became Kreese, the merciless founder of Cobra Kai. I feel like he should have just learnt it through experience and not through some other teacher. However, they just revealed that he learnt to be this way because of his commanding officer, which I find really anticlimactic. He's also just way too dramatic in this series, because otherwise we never really understand why someone came up with these philosophies in the first place. In every sentence he's just talking about war or soldiers or some analogy for a battle. And while some of this is okay, doing it too much just makes him seem like a maniacal villain. This also leads to him acting out of character. He keeps kicking out students for being too weak, even though he first took Johnny in as a student when he was weak, so this doesn't really add up. Overall, Kreese is just too extreme in this show, which is ironic considering that this show was originally about humanizing the villains. Now let's move on to Daniel. I have a lot of issues with Daniel in seasons 2 and 3, as he often acts out of character and goes back on his growth. At the end of season 1, he talks to Robbie about how Johnny isn't a bad guy and that he's just got a lot of demons, and was led down a dark path. However, at the beginning of season 2, he talks about how Miguel is a terrible person and how he is Cobra Kai's top bully. This just goes in direct contradiction with the growth he went through in season 1, so it doesn't make any sense. He also has a subplot about struggling to promote his dojo, which doesn't really make any sense considering everyone in the valley knows about his karate. In the end, he gives up promoting the dojo at all, saying that whoever needs him will come to him. Also, if you don't promote your dojo, how will people know it exists? However, this also does not make any sense, because the whole point of the dojo was to make sure that people didn't go to Cobra Kai and to put them out of business. At the end of season 2, Daniel and Johnny have this really good moment together, where they just go down a lift in silence knowing that they both failed as senseis to stop the school fight from happening. It was the point in the show where they stopped arguing with and hating each other. However, this gets ruined in season 3 where they just go back to arguing and hating each other again. Daniel tells Johnny that Robbie did what he did because he has too much of Johnny in him. However, that just goes against Mr. Miyagi's philosophy of there not being any bad student, only a bad teacher. It also goes against him telling Robbie that he doesn't have to be like Johnny, so saying this was just completely nonsensical. Also, at the end of the season, even though he hates the no mercy rule, he tries to kill Kreese for what happened. Overall, Daniel's just incredibly inconsistent in this show, and that's incredibly disappointing. Johnny in season 1 was the best character in this show. Finally, let's talk about Johnny. He ends season 1 with the realization that Cobra Kai is flawed and that it's actively leading his students down a dark path. In the later seasons, we see him teaching his students about showing mercy and about not always striking first. However, he often doesn't practice what he preaches. For example, he continually beats on a guy at a chop shop while looking for Robbie, he rips out a guy's earring at a bar, and he even threatens to kill Kreese. In one episode, he tells his Eagle Fang students to not start fights. However, immediately in the next scene, he threatens to start a fight with Daniel outside of the prison. It's just incredibly annoying how inconsistent he is. Also, when teaching new philosophies to his students, like moving forward and going all in, he never has any moment of doubt as to whether these are good lessons, which seems ironic considering how in season 1, he was doubting everything about Cobra Kai at the end. They also make him remain a terrible father, as he chooses to stay with Miguel rather than visit Robbie, which ignores all the growth he went through. In season 1, he said that his biggest mistake in life was to abandon his son. However, in season 3, they make him repeat that mistake, just so that they can make Robbie hate Johnny again. Also, in the season 3 finale, Ali says that Johnny and Daniel are rivals because they recognize parts of themselves in each other and maybe they don't always like what they see. The problem with that is that it doesn't make sense. Johnny and Daniel dislike each other because of all they've done to each other. From Johnny's point of view, Daniel stole his loved ones away from him. Johnny spray painted Daniel's billboard, Daniel doubled Johnny's rent, Daniel tried to get Johnny banned from the tournament, Johnny kept Daniel's child away from him. So I have no idea what this statement is referring to, and there's no elaboration to it. Overall, I am just very confused by Johnny in this show, because of how inconsistent he is with his morals. Also, I'm not talking about Tori because I don't know what to think about her. I also think the show mishandles the philosophies of Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do. Let's first talk about Miyagi-Do. I feel like Miyagi-Do is treated as if it's perfect. While it is different from Cobra Kai, the show never portrays this as a shortcoming of Miyagi-Do. And in the one case where Miyagi-Do could be flawed, that being when you have no choice but to strike first, the show retcons in that Miyagi-Do had this secret offensive side just for this situation, and that there are absolutely no flaws with it. This just makes the show a lot less grey and ambiguous, which I think goes against the show's quality. The show also greatly mishandles its portrayal of Cobra Kai in the later seasons, and this portrayal is actually inconsistent with season 1. In season 1, the show made it a point that all parts of Cobra Kai were flawed. They showed Miguel and Hawk both striking first against Robbie in completely unjustified situations. They showed Aisha storming off after losing a fight. And they showed how Eli, instead of learning to accept himself, decided to change himself to become more likable, while still having the same insecurities that he used to. However, in later seasons, they exclusively focus on the no mercy rule, with Johnny only teaching students to not always follow that rule, and still striking first as he used to, without any doubt. By only focusing on a single issue, this has greatly reduced the depth that this show used to have. And I know, I'm about to sound like some weirdo, incredibly invested in the love lives of these characters. But I'm actually talking about this for the opposite reason, because I hate this part of the show. These people, i.e. Miguel, Sam, Robbie and Tori, get together, break up, get together with other people, break up, then get back together. And oftentimes, it doesn't even make sense. For how no one knows when Sam and Robbie broke up. Like when Miguel and Sam cheated on their partners with each other, or when Miguel got with Tori. I hate this aspect of the show because I feel like I'm watching a soap opera and I can't take it seriously. And even now, I feel like some weirdo soap opera critic when I'm talking about this. Let me give you some examples. Moving on, the characters in this show do some incredibly ridiculous things, and the stakes are raised nonsensically high. Hawk rounds up a gang to attack Dimitri, leading to a huge fight in the middle of a mall while everyone is filming. The Cobras break into Miyagi-Do, destroy the place, and steal a Medal of Honor. The Cobras mug thousands of dollars off Nate. Dimitri ends up in the hospital and no one there questions why it happened. The Cobras vandalize, steal from, and harass people at an arcade until they fight the Miyagi-Dos, ending up with Hawk breaking Dimitri's arm. Kreese puts a live Cobra in Daniel's dealership. Cobras break into Daniel's house to attack the Eagle Fangs and Miyagi-Dos, leading to another all-out brawl. The Cobras break into a zoo to steal a snake. Despite all of this, the police do not get involved at all. And why, may you ask? Because in Season 3, Kreese filed a restraining order on Amanda. I don't understand how this stops anyone else from reporting these crimes, and this is clearly just done to raise the stakes and make this series seem like an all-out war. This is especially ironic when you realize that in Season 2, the police show up just to stop a party. Even if you ignore how nonsensical this is, it also affects the characters, as they are just made out to be more evil and nowhere near as realistic as they could have been. Miguel and Sam never addressed the roller rink incident before getting back together. Also, a lot of incidents just happen and then are just never brought up again. We never see Miguel get the money from the Cobras for his surgery, and he never finds out that it was stolen. The show has just become ridiculous with what is possible in its world, trying to prove that karate is the only way to solve these problems. But now, I think I understand why. The writers want to force conflict into the show, even if it doesn't make any sense. I've brought up that the characters act out of character, that the show acts almost like a soap opera at times, and how there are ridiculous stakes with no consequences. This is why Robbie kicks Miguel off the balcony. This is why Johnny and Daniel argue with each other at Season 3, even though they stopped doing that in Season 2. This is why Robbie gets angry at Johnny in Season 2, even though he forgave him in Season 1. This is why Sam and Miguel cheat on their partners with each other. And this is why so much crime is committed. This is why Robbie cannot understand why Daniel got him arrested. Finally, the show is no longer what it was meant to be. All of these events only exist to create conflict. It's just drama for the sake of drama. Originally, Cobra Kai was a grey show, where there wasn't any definitive villain in this series. That was one of the best parts, as you often don't know who to root for, and your allegiances may often change. However, in Season 3, this is no longer true. Kreese is the villain of this show, and so everyone with him is on the bad side, and everyone against him is on the good side. While yes, there are sympathetic characters on the bad side, like Robbie and Tori, their story is likely going to be focused on redeeming themselves and turning against the definitive bad side of the show and joining the good side. This issue is also caused by Johnny and Daniel joining forces. They were the root of this show's conflict, as these were two likable, relatable and understandable characters who both come off as protagonists of their own stories, pitted against one another. So putting them on the same side makes you know exactly who you are rooting for, and has made the show more black and white than it should have ever been. Making the show more black and white goes against the entire identity and purpose of the show, as it was meant to convey that in real life, there is no villain, just people shaped by their influences. This cannot be presented nearly as well when the show has clear-cut villains and clear-cut heroes. So despite all that I have said, I'm still looking forward to Season 4, because I think I'm going to have a good time watching it. However, I'm not looking forward to it nearly as much as I would be if it did not suffer from these flaws. And I'm only excited because I think it's going to be a good time, not because I think it's going to be a great show. I hope to continue making content on YouTube, but until next time, may the algorithm be with you, because it certainly isn't with me.